like to talk about my Muslim birth chapter and how I came to make the decisions that I did to make the final image that you see, called to prayer. I'd heard about the Adhan prayer right from the beginning of my research. When you research Muslim birth on the internet, it's one of the first things that comes up. But it's not till towards the end that all the dots joined and the vision aligned in my mind. I chose the hospital location in West London Film Studios, and I started to book in the characters that I needed for the birth scene. And I advertised on my Instagram stories for a midwife, and I had a response from the perfect midwife, Rebecca, who you see in the final image. And I was talking to her on the phone. It was a moment where a light bulb went off. I was talking to her about the Adhan prayer, and I was saying to her that I'd heard from midwives that the prayer's usually done a few hours after, isn't it, when the baby's cleaned and wrapped. And she said to me, well, she does see many Muslim parents do the Adhan prayer with the cord attached. In fact, she has parents request silence so that the first words the baby hears are that of the prayer.
We'd like our baby to be born in silence, with no staff talking. The first words he should hear are the Adhan call to prayer that I will whisper in his writing.
This was an Islamic birth undisturbed. That was the moment when I realised that the Adhan prayer would be the focus of the image. The fact that the scene is going to be in hospital was all the more appropriate, that the Adhan prayer becomes a protective mechanism almost to keep the baby in close proximity to the family, to the father, and the familial voice speaking into the ear, but also connected still to the mother by the umbilical cord. So the baby is safe within that family unit. Now, up to that point, I had in my head that the image would be a very woman-led image. Throughout the whole process of planning, up to then, I'd planned to call the image Purdah. I was very keen to call it Purdah. Purdah is a word meaning female seclusion, referring to the burqa that women use to shield themselves, and also the idea of women being separated from men. I was going to play on that word, and I didn't actually know whether there would be a man in it. I'm thinking maybe there could be a man, I might get a man just as an option. But at that point I knew it couldn't be called Purdah anymore, so that's when I had a change of tact and decided to focus the image on the idea of prayer and call it Call to Prayer. I wanted to make sure that if I was to show a man whispering into the ear of a freshborn baby, cord attached, that Muslims weren't going to look at the picture and say, well, we wouldn't do that straight away. We would wait for the cord to be cut and the baby to be cleaned and wrapped. So, as well as having the midwife's word for it, Rebecca's word for it, that this is actually done with some Muslims, I also decided to include in the video some really amazing, powerful pictures of a Muslim father actually speaking into the ear of a very, very freshborn baby covered in vernix, that Jamie Crockett, a doula and photographer, gave me permission to feature, and thanks also to the parents who allowed me to feature that, because those were my rock-solid proof that this does happen, you know? So despite the fact that not maybe all Muslims do this, there were enough Muslims that do this to show that, you know, I'm not telling porkies or just trying to make a pretty picture of what I think is good. By making a picture of it, I could influence more Muslims to do it like that. Now, as a photographer, usually I have to pick between somebody who is authentic, who maybe I could get off the street or something, somebody who really looks the part, but who might not have experience in the acting world and might not even turn up, and finding someone from the industry who is professional, knows what they're doing, you know, is not self-conscious, etc. When it came to the man who plays a father in my image, I happened to find somebody who ticks both those boxes. Bilal Sabir, who brought more passion to the role than I ever anticipated. He's Muslim, he knew the prayer so he could say it out loud. He's a professional actor and he did it with great gusto and emotion, made me emotional. And so he brought this whole dimension to the video that I wasn't expecting. The greatest thing about this chapter was working with him. And I dread to think what it would have been like if I just had a model who was posing as a Muslim, who didn't bring that authenticity to the role, because I wouldn't have had such an interesting video sequence to put at the beginning of the piece. So at the beginning, you hear a dialogue from the father.
Before the cord is cut, before he is cleaned, before any examination, we would like that moment together.
I've put this dialogue in for two reasons. One, is so that people know what's going on when the baby and the prayer all comes on the screen, or a bit of pre-explanation. But also it helps to hit home to people that they have a right to ask for what they want in hospital, in a way that is both authoritarian but also polite. So I really love the voice of Bilal and the way that he delivered that script, because it's perfect, and I just love him for that. So if you look in the final picture, the birthing mother is played by model Shweta Gupta. I was really attracted to the images in her portfolio, which instantly spoke to me and told me that she could do this role. In the final image, she's got her head thrown back in this kind of prayer-like reverie. And on the day, I made her do different kind of poses, but this was the one that stuck with me the most in the end. It went with this idea of prayer. It allowed the father to look like centre stage in this particular moment. She's in that moment of exhaustion and relief. The father is wearing a blood red topi, the hat, so this was supplied in amongst many other props and pieces of clothing by another angel I had working with me, a lady called Najma, a Muslim lady who came along and helped me do all the styling, and that was invaluable from a perspective of myself working with an unfamiliar religion and culture. Also in the picture, you see a lady standing on the left. This relates to some of my research that I did as well. When I was talking to a midwife called Sheena Byram, who is a fantastic, wonderful, wise woman who has years of experience working with all kinds of women, including Muslims. And I was talking to her when I was deep in doubt and confusion. She was just talking to me about, in some of the Pakistani Muslim families that she's worked with, sometimes there was a controlling family figure, like a mother-in-law, who would exert a bit of a negative influence over the birthing mother. And I started to wonder what I was getting into with this particular cultural group. But in fact, it became more of an inspiration than anything, because when I'm making one of these pictures, it isn't at all about making a perfect idyllic image that has no tensions and no threats at all. There's no such thing really as a completely undisturbed birth. The point is with my pictures is to make scenes that make a point about something that helps make a birth undisturbed. And so obviously in my case I've gone on to use the Adhan prayer as that device. But when you look at my final picture, you see that there's a character on the left with the pink headscarf on. And some people might look at her and think, why does she look so miserable? Why does she look almost threatening? I think maybe some Americans might not get it if they see her and not wonder why she looks happier. Now, I did get many shots of this woman, many shots where she looks happier than the one that I've specifically chosen. I wanted there to be that ambiguity of whether she is friend or foe, good or bad, approving or disproving, and neither do I want to tell you who she is and what she is feeling. She could be the mother's mother, she could be the father's mother, and she could well be a figure that is about to enter the scene and cause a disturbance. She could be someone that the family doesn't like. So I wanted that feeling of realism, how, families don't always get on together in any culture. The doctor as well is on her half of the image. There is that suggestion that there is disturbance coming in from the left-hand side of the frame. The doctor is interesting as well because I only decided to have him in the image 48 hours before the shoot. So I was just laying in bed thinking that I needed an extra character, just in case. I need a doctor who can be a device. It might be worth mentioning also that when I was shooting him, I asked the midwife, I said, look, if you've delivered a baby and you were doing this delayed cord clamping, would there be a doctor coming in trying to rush you or, trying to hurry things on? And she said, honestly, no. The doctor would be coming in to check on us before the baby's born. He would be coming in to check whether everything's okay and whether the woman needs a cesarean, but afterwards, no. So I thought, okay, well, instead of having the doctor as being kind of confrontational, I want him just to be looking around the corner of the curtain with more amusement and intrigue than anything. And I think that's worked nicely because instead of having the midwife gesturing to him or anything overly dramatic going on, I just want him to be there to make sure the viewer knows that we're in the West. We're not in Dubai, we're in the UK in particular, but we're in the West. And I also want him to help anchor the familial space that's going on the other side of the picture. This ritual is making a sacred space, almost warding off unnecessary intrusion from hospital staff. Because physically he fills that space in the composition. You'll also see a Kwik Save bag. Now, this has a very interesting story behind it. I'll try and sum it up really quickly. Basically, I wanted there to be a 1990s supermarket bag in this image to have that reference to my childhood. So I went onto eBay and I looked for an old supermarket bag. They were coming up at like £10 each. I was almost about to buy one when I thought I'd text my sister and see whether she had one. And it turns out there was an old Kwik Save bag in our Christmas box, which she dug out and posted to me. Kwik Save is a shop that used to be in Hare Hills, a shop I knew well from my childhood and that British people will recognise. And so this was my way of connecting the final image back to the part 1 of the video shot in Hare Hills and where all the original inspiration for this image comes from. Part 1 of the video wouldn't be the same without Rosie Hardy's amazing videography. Rosie Hardy is a self-portrait artist. Most of her stuff is self-portraits, but I just knew that as soon as she turned her camera onto Hare Hills, she would get magic, and she did. She got the kind of shots that I wouldn't get walking around for a week, or most people wouldn't get walking around for a year. The lady on the right of the image with her hands cupped to the heavens, this was a suggestion made to me by a lady called Shema Hussein, and she wrote her PhD on Muslim birth in the West. I was emailing her and asking for her thoughts on my image idea. A suggestion she made to me, if there was a female family member present praying, that at the moment of birth, that's something she would likely be doing. Obviously, I can't take every suggestion that's made to me from all the people I speak to. On this case, it worked really nicely because I wanted this woman to be lower so that it would give variation in the positioning of the figures through the frame, so they weren't all standing. So if she was kneeling, it made sense that she would be holding her hands like this. I had a Quran and Quran stand, but they wouldn't work well with her kneeling. Upon advice from the Muslim people present, they suggested that she shouldn't be on the floor with the Quran stand and the Quran book because that would be disrespectful to Islam. So I decided to remove those from the picture and just have the prayer mat. The Flower of Maryam, the plant you see in there, this is something I heard about from a midwife in Bradford. She told me about the plant that some Muslim women bring to labour with them. And as soon as you said this, my ears pricked up because, obviously I'm looking for visual things to put, and I knew straight away I'd want that plant in there, whatever plant she was on about. So I went on to research that and found out it was a Flower of Maryam, bought my own, experimented with it at home and, got it into the picture. I also got dates in there as well, because some Muslim women are known to eat dates during labour and also give the baby a date. I didn't really have time to talk too much about Tanik, which is a Muslim ritual of giving the newborn a date. It was all a bit too much to put in the video. I wanted to focus more on the Adhan prayer itself. This picture is the first time I've actually got all the characters in frame in one single shot. So I haven't composited them together, which doesn't usually happen. Normally I prefer to composite the best of each character in post-production. I made this picture 2 or 3 weeks before the whole coronavirus thing started. Some of the stuff that's been done in hospital with regards to separation, this picture becomes even more poignant in terms of keeping that baby within the family unit.